Welcome to this series of Eden Talk, where we are reviewing the book Adventist Home. A number of presentations have been put together. Hope you find them beneficial. Stay tuned in and enjoy this presentation.
Greetings, friends. Welcome to the second part of the Standards of Family Living. And in this second part of the series, I am going to look at some of the aspects that affect the marriage institution. So I will first look at divorce. Now, divorce, as most of you might be aware, leaves a lot of scars, leaves a lot of hurt amongst the affected partners. Divorce has led to the breakup of many families. And in most cases, it is because of the non-adherence to the principles of marriage as prescribed by the originator of the institution himself, God. Now, it must be understood that marriage is a contract for life. So it is a contract that links the destinies of two individuals. When two people come together and are joined in holy matrimony and in a marriage setup, the expectation is that they will only separate when one of them dies. But what do we see nowadays? What we see is a lot of divorce. The divorce rates are as high as the rates at which people are getting married, right? And when Jesus came to earth, one of his goals was to try and correct the misconceptions of marriage. During the time of Jesus, many men were quite abusive in their marriages, right? And they were not adhering to the principles of marriage. But when Jesus came, one of his goals was to realign the people's thinking around the marriage issues. Now, if you want to see how important marriage is or was to Jesus, you'll see that one of his first miracles was performed at a wedding, just to show that he values the marriage institution, right? And while these people are getting married and getting divorced, right, it must be understood that when you get divorced, right, you are not supposed to marry again. In fact, one of the main reasons that are given for getting a divorce is adultery. Everything else is something that individuals are expected to deal with. Now, the good thing is that nowadays there's a lot of help around. There's a lot of counselors, marriage counselors. There's a lot of religious leaders that are trained appropriately to counsel people around marriage issues. So it must be understood that adultery is the only reason that one is expected to use, for divorce. But other than that, the expectation is that people will be together forever. Now, sometimes the situation is so untenable to the extent that people get to separate as couples. Now, when you are separated from a spouse, for whatever challenges you're facing, it is you are urged to endeavor to get back together and also bring yourself under the control of God. And God's ear is not deaf to the cries and pleas of people that are trying to get back together into a marriage setup. Now, you also find that people get divorced or separated because of mistreatment, okay? Now, there are times when you see that the mistreatment is so much that the life of another individual is in danger. And under such circumstances, people are urged to separate and then consider the options whilst in separation. Now, what we see also out there in the world is that as much as people are getting married and getting divorced, right? On paper, the divorce decree is issued, but in God's sight, you are still considered as married. Hence, one is urged to remain single unless if there is adultery. So, having talked about divorce now, the understanding is that it's not a good thing, and as Christians, we need to endeavor to prevent getting into such situations where we get a divorce because of the ripple effects and the repercussions and negative effects of the divorce. Now, another matter that we need to talk about when it comes to the standards of living is our attitude towards an unbelieving companion. More often than not, people get married to people that do not necessarily believe in the same, belief. So, what are we to do under such circumstances? Okay, the question then is: should a Christian husband or wife leave an unbelieving husband or wife? Now, remember, God sees marriage as a permanent feature. You're married forever until death do you part. So, do not give up on the spouse. Okay, you are urged to exert a godly influence on the godless spouse. One must endure and give a living example of self-control, a living example of patience and kindness, yielding up to the principles of God. One must also allow God to work on the spouse. So prayer and praying for the spouse is recommended, being careful to be considerate, patient, and forbearing, obviously without wavering from the godly principles. So inasmuch as one tries to do good by the spouse, but one must never go astray from the principles of God. So we are encouraged to be people that are patient, people that show love and kindness to the unbelieving spouse. Our duty is to uplift Christ so that many can be drawn unto Christ, including the unbelieving spouses. Another aspect that we need to talk about is the minister's family. Here we're talking about individuals who have the responsibility to look after the church. We're looking at the pastors, we're looking at the elders. Okay? Now, the home life of a minister, whether it's a pastor or an elder, is to be an example to the church. Right? The first duty of the ministers is to their family and the children. They should not spend too much time on church duties to the extent that their children and their family suffer. Okay? And it must be emphasized that when they lead an exemplary life, when their family is an example, many can also be led to follow suit within the church. The wife of the minister is recommended to be a helper and not a hindrance. The wife of the minister can be a great blessing to a husband or a hindrance to the work of God. So those who are wives of the ministers must endeavor to support their husbands in the ministry so that the word of God can be spread to the rest of the world. The ministers must also reach in before they reach out. So the lessons that they give to the church must first be given to their family before they give them to the church. Charity begins at home but does not end there. So they must start with teaching their family and their children before they take on the responsibility to teach the church. Now, the last aspect that I'm going to look at is our responsibility as children to our aged parents. Okay? The Bible urges us to honor our parents, especially to honor our father and mother. And this is a lifelong commitment, especially for the feeble and old parents. We must be very deliberate in our efforts to respect and honor our aged parents. We must create a smooth pathway, endeavoring to provide food and shelter. It's not enough for us to provide food and shelter to our aged parents. They together with everything else. It can happen that the parents may have wronged you during childhood or at some stage during your life, but it is not upon you to revenge on your parents. We are still urged to respect and honor our parents, even if they were unjust at some point in our lives. We must be patient with infirmities. As old age settles, the physiological systems starts to slow down. All the processes that are necessary for the maintenance of life will start to decline. And because of that, there's a lot of diseases and infirmities that may start to creep in. So we, as the children of the aged parents, are urged to be patient during those times that our are sick. We need to show that love. We need to show that kindness. And with that, I conclude the second part of the standards of family living. Thank you.